Okay, perfect. Thank you. So basically today I wanted to talk about what happened at the trade deadline yesterday. I know a lot of people were thinking Kyle Lowry was going to get traded. I thought there was a reasonable chance he stuck around. He ended up sticking around. Yeah, I just want to get into it a little bit. So I'm going to start off with the Norm trade. I think. And I also wanted to say, like, usually I script things beforehand and edit it down so it is a little bit tighter. And I'm just going to kind of talk extemporaneously and go off the cuff a little bit, so it's not going to be quite as tight. More of a chill vibe. So first I want to talk about the Norm trade. Obviously, with him being an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season, I think he was going to command a pretty good salary, like 20 million, somewhere in that vicinity, which I think is worth it for some teams. I particularly think it's worth it if you're a team who is either in sort of the last gasp of a contention window, like the Blazers are sort of getting to with Damian Lillard, or a younger team who doesn't have a ton of salary tied up in vets and has a lot of guys on rookie deals. Like I thought maybe the Pelicans might go after him, but that wasn't the case. I think the Norm trade is pretty good. They basically replace a lot of Norm's 3-point shooting, which is pretty good. I think Gary Trent's about a 40% 3-point shooter. He is probably a better defender. I haven't watched a ton of Gary Trent Jr. Defensive footage, so I'm not super. I'm not going to comment decisively about his defensive ability, but I know that he has a reputation as a decent defender. I think it's hard to gauge anything from defensive metrics, especially when you play on a team that doesn't have a good defense. Like, it just is so interconnected. It's hard to gauge. But I think he'll be good defensively, and it's not like the guy that he's replacing is some elite defender. Norm is only okay. He's not atrocious or anything, but he has a tendency to fall asleep off ball, especially. So I don't think it'll be difficult to reproduce his defensive production. One of the things the Raptors will definitely miss with losing Norm and replacing him with Gary Trent Jr. is they'll miss Norm's ability to attack the basket. Norm really goes hard at the rim. He can take guys off the dribble. I don't think Gary Trent Jr. has that in his bag quite as much. But another part of this is, like, Gary Trent Jr. is younger. He's cheaper. He's a restricted free agent instead of being unrestricted. So I think all of those things together make this a pretty lateral to good move for the Raptors. Like, I don't think they really got any better today, but from like an asset management perspective, a roster building perspective, I think they did well with this trade. Rodney Hood, I don't really think enters into it at all, other than the Raptors maybe get a chance to see what they think of him. But I mean, he's coming off an Achilles tear, so really you're just looking at him as he's rehabbing. I think it's going to be hard to gauge anything. I don't really think he's going to give the Raptors much. Yeah, Gucci in the comments mentioned he has the Achilles injury, and so I don't think it's really, you can expect anything out of that. But overall, I was pretty happy with that deal. I think the Blazers. It's hard because I'm like, the Blazers could use some defense, but really, how much is one defender going to impact a team that is going to play Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Carmelo Anthony? It's like, so you add one good defender into the mix, and it's going to make you a good team. That is probably not going to happen. So yeah, I don't mind the move to just kind of go all in on, we're just going to try to blow teams out of the water. I think CJ, Dame, and Norm is probably one of the best perimeter scoring trios in the NBA now. I don't know if you guys maybe saw my thread on Twitter about Norm being essentially one of the top 5 most efficient guys on, I think, more than 12 attempts a game, which is pretty insane for for Norm. And so I think that was a nice move for them. I think they're going to like his skills. And for Norm, I think it's going to be great, because now you think about, like, okay, you have Damian Lillard, who sometimes has to get double teamed at like 30 feet from the rim. And then you're going to swing it to CJ, defense overreacts to him, swing it to Norm. And now Norm is attacking the weak side of the defense instead of trying to have to create for himself on the strong side. And we all know how deadly Norm is. So I think that that's going to be a great environment for him, and I think it's going to set him up to make a bit of a splash in the playoffs and get a good payday in the offseason, whether that's from Portland. I don't think they would do this trade unless they had some intention of paying him, but yeah, I mean, he's an unrestricted free agent, so you never know. Maybe there were reports that the Pacers were prepared to outbid anybody for his services. So if I'm Norm, I would push that to the limit. Yeah, so I think that trade was kind of good all around for both sides. The Matt Thomas trade, I think, is fine. Like I was never super duper high on Matt Thomas. Like, he has a nice shot. For whatever reason, the Raptors coaching staff didn't really see him being a huge contributor to the team. He wasn't getting a lot of minutes, and I think that's totally fine. He just is that, like, there's a reason sometimes why guys don't make it into the NBA until they're like 27 or 28 years old. And usually that reason is that they're not good enough to be consistent rotation players on a team. And their upside doesn't spark enough excitement from front offices. And I mean, I think that was probably the case for Matt Thomas. And he had some good shooting games here and there. Maybe you wish he was in the rotation a little bit more to see what he can do. But also, I kind of have grown to trust the coaching staff and the management's talent evaluation. And if they thought he wasn't good enough to get run, then I mean, I'm fine with that. So to get a second round pick for somebody who wasn't even in the rotation really at all, I'm fine with that. And then Terrence Davis, I didn't really want him on the team in the first place after his domestic violence stuff in the offseason. I thought that was pretty horrific. I think he also was not very good this season. Like, last season, there was some reason to be hopeful that he was going to really, like, take a big leap and be this Norm-esque player. But again, sometimes guys who are undrafted go undrafted for a reason. And I mean, his decision-making this season was pretty brutal. And so I think he was probably going to be out of the Raptors rotation regardless for basketball stuff, for basketball reasons. I didn't want him on the team anyways for non-basketball reasons. And so to get something for him instead of just cutting him, sure, I'll take that. If you hear noise in the background, it's just my dog trying to scrape his way out of the crate. And then the other deal that wasn't a deal was the Lowry deals that were reported. And I think the Sixers might have made a bit of a mistake to not go all in with Simmons and Embiid right now. Time will tell. We'll see what happens in the offseason. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. In terms of the Raptors side of things, I think I'm kind of satisfied with just keeping Lowry. It would have been great to trade him and get like a big haul and like 2 picks and a young player or something that you can get excited about. But from the trades that I saw reported, I don't know that definitively there ever was even a single good quality first round pick on the table. Like, maybe the Sixers offered a first round pick, and if it's their first round pick, then that is what, like the 28th pick in the draft, which is not nothing, but it also is not super inspiring for a player of Lowry's caliber. And then, Tyrese Maxey or Matisse Thybulle would have been really good. But if you're just getting one of those guys and like the 28th pick, then I don't hate keeping Lowry, because you're also you're essentially letting Lowry walk for very little in that case, and you're hurting your playoff chances this year. I know their playoff chances aren't super great anyways right now, or their chances of making it far into the playoffs. I sort of feel like they're stuck in no man's land for this season. They have kind of played like crap. I think they've played well below the level of their team, like their talent level. I think part of that has to do with them playing in Tampa. I think that 2-8 start is very reflective of that. And then after that 2-8 start, they basically won 2/3 of their games for, I don't know, however many weeks. And then they started getting COVID. And they sort of have fallen off a cliff on that big losing streak. And I sort of think that the Raptors are better than their record in terms of talent level. And I think even if they traded Lowry for whatever, Maxey and a pick, I don't think they would have been bad enough to tank into like a bottom 5 seed or something. I sort of think they're just going to end the season around 500, kind of however they play it. I think now with Lowry staying, they probably will rip off a few more wins than they would have a better chance maybe at that 6 seed, most likely having to play in one of the play-in spots, and that's fine too. Yeah, basically they're not going to be title contenders this year. If the offers they didn't think weren't good enough for Lowry, then yeah, keep him. I'll watch another 25 games of Lowry, and then we'll figure out what happens in the offseason. And I think the offseason options are not bad for the Raptors. Like, yes, it would suck for Lowry to walk for nothing. But also, if Lowry wants to go to a contender, odds are they're not going to have a ton of cap space. Not a lot of teams have cap space. Some do. And teams can create cap space. But also, like, Lowry wants to get paid. That's something that he's always felt throughout his career. So I think, yeah, I think there's a reasonable chance that if he wants like that 2-year, $50 million deal, or, I mean, he could even ask for $30 million, and it wouldn't be crazy on a 1-year deal. The Raptors could always sign and trade him, probably for a package that's not too dissimilar from what it sounds like they were getting offered from the Heat and the Sixers. So I really don't think that was a bad move. And I mean, worst case is he walks for nothing. But another option is you just re-sign him to that 2-year, $50 million deal, and we get to watch 2 more years of Lowry, him playing with Siakam, OG, Fred, Gary Trent Jr. I mean, that's a quality lineup. I'm happy to see that. So yeah, I thought, I thought Masai knew what Lowry's value was, and Bobby Webster, I should say too. He's technically the general manager, but Masai and Bobby, yeah, they knew Lowry's value, and nobody was really willing to pony it up, and that's fine. I'm happy to keep Lowry and keep watching him. In terms of like the Heat side of things, I see why they didn't want to include Tyler Hero. I sort of said earlier in the season that if the Raptors were going to trade Lowry, that Hero would be one of the prospects that I would be targeting from the Heat. I think his shot creation is interesting. He's really young. He's a little bit overrated. He's not shooting super well from 3, but also like the building blocks are there, and he's a talented young guy. And yeah, so I think the Raptors were right to sort of insist on him, and I think ultimately the Heat were probably right to hold off because I'm not 100% sure if Lowry puts the Heat over the top. I'm just not 100% sold on their roster as it currently sits against the Nets, and against, like, you know, the West Coast juggernauts too, or even the Bucks necessarily. I know they beat the Bucks last season, but the Bucks did get a little bit better this offseason, I think. And so I think the Heat were probably okay, especially having Oladipo as the backup plan. Like, I very easily see how you talk yourself into that. It's like, well, screw it, we'll keep Hero. He works well with Bam Adebayo's timeline. Like, the Heat sort of have what the Raptors had a few years ago, where they've got these like aging guys. You know, they've got Jimmy Butler, they've got Andre Iguodala, some of their vets, Goran Dragic, but then they also have this young core that's blossoming with Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, and who else they got? Duncan Robinson, maybe. Kendrick Nunn, again, another domestic abuse guy I don't really care for, but he's got some talent. And Precious Chua, of course, as well, I like. So yeah, I think the Heat are in a situation right now where you can just be like, I mean, we made the finals last year. Maybe we make the finals again. Maybe we get put out a little earlier. that's fine too. And then try to sign somebody in the offseason. They're a destination city, so that's a very doable thing for them. And from the Sixers side of things, I am really not as confident that they made the right move. I think their title window is wide open right now. I think Embiid is playing like a top 5 player, maybe the MVP. And I think Ben Simmons and him, I think Lowry would fit into that trio really well. Take a little bit of playmaking pressure off Ben Simmons. Let him be a little bit of a cutter sometimes. Lowry can work well off ball when Simmons is controlling things. He gives great tenacity and great leadership, and just a brilliant guy who kind of does everything all over the court. And I mean, you need those guys to win championships. And I don't think the asking price was too crazy. And I don't know that the Sixers have the same sort of timeline as the Heat do, partially because of Joel Embiid's injury history. I think if you've got a season, I mean, he's injured right now, but it's supposed to not be super long term. But yeah, I think you just need to capitalize on these seasons where he is relatively healthy going into the playoffs, because you don't know if that's going to be the case next year. And I mentioned this earlier on Twitter, that I think if Morey had already been with the Sixers for a couple of years, I think he would be a bit more willing to just seize the title window. But I think because he just got there a year and a half ago or something, I think he just played it a little bit more conservatively, because I don't think you want to be seen as the guy who comes in and starts dumping draft assets and prospects to bring in guys who are on expiring deals. And so I think it was easy for him to try and play it a little bit conservatively, and I wonder if he'll regret that, in a few months' time, or in a few years' time. But I mean, but also maybe the Sixers win the title this year, and none of this is relevant. So you got to just kind of see what happens when the rubber meets the road. But yeah, I think Lowry would have made them probably title favorites. Certainly favorites in the East. I think that team is better than the Nets. There's more two-way power on that Sixers team with Lowry. And I'm not 100% sure what the Nets are going to do about Embiid if he starts beasting down low. I'm not sure how effective DeAndre Jordan is going to be in combating that. And then I think Nick Claxton is probably just not quite big enough to handle Embiid. And the other part of it is the Sixers actually have defenders that can keep up with the Nets. If you have Embiid as a rim protector, Simmons, one of the best perimeter defenders in the league with tremendous size, that's great. You throw him at Harden or maybe KD, and then you put Lowry on Kyrie, and you have some other reasonable defenders as well. But the Sixers decided not to go for it, and we'll see what happens with them. I'm going to scroll through some of the comments here, because I haven't really been paying a ton of attention to them, and see what questions we got here. Do you think they have a plan for our center position from Crispy Nugs? Not really. I think I heard some talk about Gorgie Jeng potentially getting bought out. That will be a great option if they could do it. He's not a superstar, but we're talking about buyout options. Nobody's a superstar. He's an okay shooter. He's got pretty good size, good strength, good tenacity, reasonable mobility. So if he did get bought out, he'd be somebody I'd be looking at. And I mean, really, any of these buyout centers I will be looking at with an empty roster spot, because because we've watched the games and we've seen what Baines has done. He's not super elite. And I think there weren't a ton of options available for centers, and the Raptors, Like it's not like a ton of centers got traded. It was like Vucevic, Daniel Tice. The Raptors, I don't think the Celtics would have wanted to trade Tice to the Raptors. I think he would have been great on the Raptors, and he's somebody I might look at in the offseason. I'm pretty sure he's expiring. But yeah, I don't think he quite gets. I don't think he really would have been available, because I don't think the Raptors had the asset. Like, it was like a luxury tax play going back the other way, and I just don't think it was an option. And then, I mean, what are you gonna trade for, like Andre Drummond or something? Like, there's no point giving up assets for somebody like that. I just think he's fairly washed at this point. Even if it would be nice to have a big body, like I just don't think that that's the sort of player who's going to put the Raptors over the top. So I think the Raptors will ultimately wind up going small, and that's how they'll address it. I think taking Norm off the court in favor of Gary Trent Jr. Gives the Raptors a little bit more height and bulk. Not a ton more. They're pretty similarly sized, but I think that could be good. And then, like, on this losing streak, it's been without OG for so much of it, and I think, like, Raptors fans need to be aware of the fact that OG is a really good rim protector. He's really important to what the Raptors do. As great of a perimeter defender as he is, his timing down low and his positioning and his strength is quite key to the Raptors. So I think between OG and Siakam, they can soak up a lot of those minutes by the basket. And then Chris Boucher, if he can stay disciplined, but I mean, this is the refrain with Chris Boucher. If he can stay disciplined, he almost never stays disciplined, but if he can stay disciplined, he'll give the Raptors some good minutes, and maybe Baines too. Like, in a series against the Sixers, you probably need a guy like Baines just to give Embiid, like, tire Embiid out a little bit, maybe. So it's nice to have a bit of a bigger guy who can just kind of go toe to toe in terms of physicality. But no, I don't think there's a super big plan for centers. I think in the offseason, maybe Jared Allen might do a little something. They might throw an offer sheet at him. And then, yeah, I would look at Daniel Tice in the offseason as well. I'm not sure who else is available. But they need something eventually. And maybe that's what they look at with their own draft pick this year as well. Who knows? I'm going to look at another question here. I think we could have made a late run for Vooch, especially since Magic were all in for giving their stars away, from Ansh Patel. I think that would have been difficult because the Bulls offer was really competitive. They gave up 2 first-round picks, which I don't think the Raptors would have wanted to do, especially with the state of Lowry and in flux. So I don't think the Raptors wanted to give up multiple first-round picks. And then Wendell Carter Jr. also going the other way gives them a prospect who they can put on the floor this year to do some talent evaluation and see if they want to pay him in the offseason. So I think that would have been a really tough offer to match in terms of value for the Magic, and I think they probably would have gone with the Bulls offer anyways. What else we got here? Sixers will regret. Miami. Sixers will regret, as will Miami, but Sixers will regret it more. Yeah. Miami really stole Oladipo. Yeah, they did. They didn't give up much for him. Kelly Olynyk. Oh, I heard somebody mention Kelly Olynyk could potentially get bought out, and that's somebody I would be interested in as well. He doesn't really give a ton of size or defensive prowess for the Raptors, but he's actually shooting, I think, in the high 30s or maybe even the 40s from 3 this season, which is impressive. And he has pretty good range too. He can do a step beyond the line as well. So that's an option. If the Sixers get bounced before the conference finals, every Raptors fan can engage in maximum smug mode. Definitely. Why were all the offers low this year? Or that's what it seems. I think the offers were low for a few reasons. I think one of it is with the play-in tournament, a lot of teams feel like they have a chance. Whereas if you're the 10th seed right now, you're already in the play-in games. So you're just like, if we can just stay here, we get a playing game. Maybe we win that one game, which is very possible, and get into the playoffs. Whereas if you're the 10 seed in a regular year and you're a couple games behind 8, then it's like, well, we're probably going to be screwed. And then if you're the 12 seed right now, you're thinking, well, we just got to win a couple games to get up. So I think there are less teams who are willing to give away talented players because they are sort of thinking, hey, let's just see if we can string a few wins together and get this get into the playoffs. And then the other part of it too is like, I think, well, I think there are a lot of expiring contracts and stuff going on right now in terms of like the bigger teams. Like a lot of guys are either just starting their deals. I'm not phrasing this the way I want to. Okay, here's what I'll say is more teams are just happy with where they are right now and want to see what happens. Like the Bucks don't need to do anything because they already did their big thing in the offseason and they have Giannis locked down. So let's just try to rip off some wins, and we don't need to do anything big if we don't need to. The Sixers, I talked about Daryl Morey's his status as a new GM, and I think that impacted the offers that they were willing to make. And also, like, I think it is fine. They also made moves in the offseason to get Seth Curry and Danny Green. So maybe they're like, we finally have a season where we have shooting around Embiid and Simmons. This is what we have planned. Let's just go for it and see how it goes. And then other contenders or potential contenders like the Heat, I think, like I said, their old guy, young guy sort of parallel tracks allowed them sort of the flexibility to just say, we're fine with what we're doing right now. The Celtics, I don't think are one move away necessarily, unless it was a really big move. And so I think they were, and also like they're nice and young. So it's just like, yeah, just let Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown continue developing into one of the best wing duos in the league. And then who else we got in the West? Lakers don't have a ton of trade assets. Clippers don't have a ton of trade assets. So those teams, like those are teams who would make big moves at the trade deadline potentially, but they unloaded all their assets to get to their contender status, or most of their assets. And so there's just not a lot to be paid out by guys or by teams. Let's see. Do you think there's a chance we miss the playoffs and get a decent pick? I do think there's a chance. I think it's more likely if we're outside of the playoffs that we made the play-in games and lost that single game or whatever. I expect the Raptors to sort of pick it up. I don't think the recent losing skid was a reflection of much other than a bunch of guys got COVID, and then a bunch of guys were just coming back from COVID. And a bunch of guys, to be honest, are still coming back from COVID. And you know, you heard, I don't know if you followed how closely you follow things, but like Jason Tatum was talking about not feeling back to 100% for like months after he got it. So you never know, something like that could happen to one of our guys. Like Pascal looks noticeably skinnier since he got it. So there's a chance that COVID derails things. But I think it's more likely that the Raptors just bounce back, play some level of winning or 500-ish basketball. And that probably is all they need to at least get into the play-in games. And I just sort of believe in the core 4 guys, I guess, to just compete like hell, and they're good enough. And as long as everybody stays healthy, I think they have a good shot at making the playoffs. And so I think it's unlikely that they'll miss the playoffs and get a really good pick. If they do get a good pick, I think it would come from like the Raptors are just barely miss the playoffs or lose in one of the play-in games and then get really lucky with the draft lottery. Do you know what the second round picks were for Terrence Davis and Thomas? No, those will get decided based on record at the end of the year. They've traded to the Jazz and the Kings, so it'll probably be one bad and one good. Why do we still have Baines? Who do you think will go for him in the buyout Oh, who do you think we will go for? We still have Baines because we don't want him, and for that same reason, nobody else does either. So that's pretty much it. I mean, like he's old. He's not on a very cheap deal. I think he's getting paid like $7 million, and why would any team want to take that on? Usually, if you're going to offload a contract that is like a bad value contract, you have to attach a positive value asset to it. And why do that when you can just say, okay, you can be on the bench, and like I said, you might need a big body against Embiid anyways. So run with that. I'm fine with that. And then in terms of the buyout market, I don't know. Maybe Kelly Olynyk. What else we got here? Will you be saving this live? Yes, as long as I don't mess it up. Embiid is having an MVP season, and they're going to waste it. He is having an MVP season, and they might waste it. We'll see. Cade Cunningham. I mean, I agree. Cade Cunningham would be great. I've heard Mobley would be a really good fit for the Raptors as well, but I just don't see the Raptors having a great opportunity to jump into the top 5 or probably top 3 to snag those guys. What are we going to do for center, though? OG it is. OG is 3/4 of our defense at this point. Oh, Khem Birch. Khem Birch, I don't think the Magic would give him up. That would have been a guy I tried to target and see if they want to give him up in a trade. But to be honest, the Magic might like him as a potential future piece and just be like, no, we want to hold on to this guy and he can play, give us some quality minutes on a relatively cheap contract. The Norm trade I covered more closer to the top of the live. Which team would I like to come out of the East besides the Raptors? So probably the Nets. I really like the trio of Kyrie, KD, and Harden. Like, I think they're entertaining guys. They're a fun team to watch. The Celtics, I like some of their guys. I don't really think they're good enough, and I can't really bring myself to root for the Celtics. The Heat I like. I could see them coming out of the East. I don't think it's a crazy idea, but it's going to be hard to match up with the Nets scoring. The Heat are having some troubles with their offense, and even if you defend the Nets really well, you're gonna have to put some points on the board, because however well you defend Harden and KD and Kyrie, they're still gonna put points up. But I really like Adebayo's game, and Butler is a Raptor killer. So they have some really nice guys. Sixers, I like the Sixers. I like Embiid. I like Simmons. Like, Simmons is a good player. I'm not a huge fan of the Sixers, but I could see them coming out of the East as well. And it would be nice to see Danny Green. So I'm kind of fine with any of the top East contenders coming out of the conference. Oh, the Bucks. I almost forgot the Bucks. Actually, of all the teams besides the Nets, I think I would be happiest about the Bucks making the finals. I love Giannis. I love his game. I like Drew Holiday's game as well. I think he was a nice pickup for them in the offseason. He's not an elite scorer or anything, but that's not really what they needed. They needed a guy who could give them really nice two-way minutes. And really, if you think of him as a replacement for Eric Bledsoe, he gives you basically Eric Bledsoe level defense, maybe even a little bit better, while also giving you way better offensive production. So that's a huge step up for them, and I could see them coming out of the East as well. Let's check some more stuff here. Should they call up Henry Ellenson again to try to do something at the big spot? I don't think that will end up being the answer. I think it'll probably be something on the buyout market, or they just decide to go small and do whatever damage they can that way. Worst possible opponent for the play-in game. Oh man. That's a tough one. Let me pull up the standings here. Worst possible opponent for the play-in game. I would love to see like one of these untested playoff teams. Like if they wind up against the Knicks or the Hawks, I would hate to play against the Heat. The Heat are in 7th right now, so there would be a potential to match up with them, and that would be bad news. I think Spoelstra and to some degree Brad Stevens sort of have Nick Nurse's number. They understand the Raptors defense and how to exploit it, and so I would not want to face them in the playing game. Azon pointed out he thinks it was, or they think it was the Warriors and the Grizzlies 2nd round picks that the Raptors got. In which case they'll both kind of be mediocre, middle of the 2nd round, I think, because I don't think either of those teams are going to be near the top or bottom of the standings. What do you think the Raptors will do with their empty roster spots? I can't remember if they already converted Yuta Watanabe. I could see them converting his two-way and just giving him a full roster spot. I think he's given them some good things, some okay shooting, good mobility, good length. Could stand to bulk up a little bit too. But I've liked what he's given them. Pacers would be one of the play-in teams that I wouldn't hate to match up against necessarily. What available player would you most wish the Raptors to target this summer? I'm not 100% sure who's all available. I would want to do a little bit of research before I get into that. Hornets or Miami to win the East? We'll see. Hopefully the Hornets can get into the playoffs with LaMelo out. They have not converted Yuta yet. So yeah, so I could see them just doing that with the roster spot if no good buyout options come about. Yeah. So I'm just going to scroll through some of the trades. I have a grading every deal at the 2021 NBA trade deadline thing up from Bleacher Report. So I'm just going to scroll through some of the trades and comment on what I think of them. So first up, we've got JJ Redick to Dallas. This is on Bleacher Report if you want to follow along. It's called Grading Every Deal at the 2021 NBA Trade Deadline. JJ Redick to Dallas. So this is Nicolo Melli and JJ Redick to the Pelicans. And the Pelicans get James Johnson, Wes Iwundu, 2021 2nd-round pick. That's a pretty balanced trade. I don't think it especially moves the needle. The Mavericks get a little bit of shooting, and the Pelicans get a chance to get a look at Wes Iwundu and get a 2nd-round pick out of it. I think that's fine for both sides. Oladipo to Miami, obviously a landslide for Miami. They gave up Avery Bradley, Kelly Olynyk, and a 2022 first-round pick swap. I mean, that's basically nothing. They didn't really get a great return for James Harden, and they were in a difficult position in the first place. Probably should have traded him in the offseason, to be honest, if they were going to go down this road, but probably easier to say in retrospect. What do we got? Lou Williams to Atlanta. I did want to talk about this one a little bit. I have not been a big Lou Williams fan for the last couple of years. I sort of feel like he's in the Jamal Crawford, like, end of career phase where he is not giving you a ton defensively, and what he's giving you offensively is sort of reproducible elsewhere. And I also think sometimes with these like seasoned vets who are really well respected by their coaches and peers and stuff, I think they sometimes get more minutes than they should just because they've had like an illustrious career. And coaches feel like pressed to play them. And I don't think he was really giving the Clippers what they needed. And Rondo, I mean, listen, I'm not going to sit here and say Rondo's good. I didn't think he was going to give the Lakers anything last year, and he really gave them a lot of good stuff in the playoffs. So if he gives them some semblance of that, even just like shoot open threes and make swing passes and communicate well on defense, I think that's fine. And they didn't give up a ton. Like, I don't view Lou Williams as a huge loss anyways. So I actually kind of like that one for the Clippers. I know some people don't agree with that. Okay, so this is the Celtics getting rid of Daniel Tice. Luke Cornett and Mo Wagner to the Celtics for Troy Brown Jr. The Bulls get Troy Brown Jr., Javonte Green, Daniel Tice, and cash. and the Wizards get Daniel Gafford and Chandler Hutchinson. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I watch a ton of Wizards and Bulls, but I like Troy Brown Jr. He's good from what I've seen for the Bulls, so that's a nice prospect to get on your roster and get some talent evaluation and let him be a contributor. I think Daniel Tice is a nice piece for them. I love his defensive mobility, his shot blocking. Celtics, essentially, I think this was a cap move, like Luke Cornett and Mo Wagner. I know Wagner's had an okay season, but that's kind of whatever for them. But also the other thing for the Celtics was they didn't want to pay Daniel Tice this offseason because I'm pretty sure they know the future of the center for them is Robert Williams III. So it's not a huge loss to lose Daniel Tice. I think it might hurt them potentially a little bit this year in the playoffs, but even still, probably not that much. Nemanja Bjelica to Miami for Mo Harkless and Chris Silva. I feel like the Kings could have got a little bit more than essentially Chris Silva and Mo Harkless. Like, Bjelica is a good shooter, good range. I think he'll give the Heat pretty good minutes. So that's one where I think the Kings got a little bit less than what they bargained for. I'm gonna just check in on the comments a little bit here. Brad is is the Van Vliet video dropping soon? Yes, it has been uploaded. It has some weird technical glitch with a new thing that YouTube implemented this week. And once that technical glitch gets sorted out, I'm going to post it to my YouTube channel. It's all about Fred Van Vliet's ability to get steals and why he has some of the best hands in the league. I got really good footage from the company that I get my footage from. So I'm pretty pumped for that one, actually. You got to check it out. Let's see here. All right, I'm going to dive back into the Bleacher Report thing. George Hill to Philadelphia. So the Knicks receive Terrence Ferguson, Vincent Poirier, who I believe has already been waived, and a 2021 second-round pick. So essentially, they get Terrence Ferguson and a second-round pick. OKC receives Tony Bradley, Austin Rivers, a 2025 second-round pick, and a 2026 second-round pick. And Philly gets Ignas Brazdeikis and George Hill. I mean, I don't hate it. George Hill gives the Sixers like a decent ball handling option. He's always been a good 3-point shooter. So I mean, I like that if they're not going to get Lowry. And I think they sold high on Tony Bradley. Not that they got a ton back for him. Yeah, this trade is all kind of a big, yeah, sure. Looking at that, OKC gets some more young guys, some draft capital. Sure, I would take that for all sides probably. And then I talked about the Portland-Toronto trade a lot already. A good trade for both sides, I believe. Oh, Aaron Gordon to Denver. Here we go. Gary Clark and Aaron Gordon for Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, a 2025 first-round pick, top 5 protected through 2027. I think this is a nice trade for the Nuggets. I think Aaron Gordon doesn't have a ton of appeal as a shooter, but he can be a slasher, and I think Jokic is the perfect guy to put a slasher with. As long as he can do well with his cutting, that looks pretty good to me. And they only gave up Gary Harris, who frankly has not played a lot in the last few seasons and has been involved in a lot of trade discussions. They've obviously been trying to move him for a while. So getting off him, or not getting off him, but finally pulling the trigger on that. And then RJ Hampton, you give up on getting to see what that prospect is going to look like. But I mean, the Nuggets are close enough right now where Aaron Gordon could be the difference between making the finals or not making the finals. So I like pulling the trigger on this. Yeah, and just a single first round pick in 2025. Maybe that'll hurt if Jokic leaves or something before then. But this, to me, this is not paying over the top assets for a guy who's potentially going to help you win a title in the next year or two. So that looks pretty good to me. And from the Magic's perspective, I think that's fine. You got a first round pick for Aaron Gordon. that only has top 5 protection on it. It'll probably convert this year. Maybe that's like the 20th pick in the draft or something, or maybe a little bit lower. It could be closer to 25. But then you also get RJ Hampton, and you get, a functional guy in Gary Harris as well. So good trade for both sides. Fournier to Boston for Jeff Teague and 2 second-round picks. I really thought that Fournier was going to have a bigger market than this. Essentially, for 2 first-round picks, Jeff Teague wasn't really giving them anything. 2 seconds is really pretty cheap for somebody who gives you Fournier's level of production. And actually, when this trade went through, I was getting worried about the trade market for Norman Powell, because I wasn't really sure if he was going to get as much of a return as I was hoping. And he did get a little bit less than I thought he was going to. So that turned out to be true for both guys. So this is a nice move for the Celtics. And if I were the Magic, this was one that happened earlier in the day, and I would have just held off, because I think you could have got 2 seconds for him at the last second as well. Vucevic to Chicago. So this is Al-Farouq Aminu and Vucevic for the Bulls, and the Magic get Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and 2 first-round picks. This year's pick is top 4 protected. So getting a 2021 first-round pick, that's probably going to fall like middle third of the draft. That's pretty nice for the Magic. It's supposed to be a stacked draft. And then a 2023 first-round pick, that's pretty good. The Bulls essentially are saying, we want to capitalize on what we've got going right now with Zach LaVine, and there are other pieces as well. I think they were ready to give up on Wendell Carter Jr. or Lowry Markkanen, maybe both, and the Magic were more interested in Wendell Carter Jr., so that's kind of just what you got to go with. Vucevic is a good player. He made the All-Star team. He falls off a little bit in the playoffs, or has, but I mean, he's a good player. And I think will work well with what they do in Chicago. So I think this was a pretty good trade for both sides. Davis to Sacramento, don't care. That was fine. Wanamaker to Charlotte, that was fine. That was kind of a nothing. All right, we're getting into the trades that don't matter at this point. Oh, JaVale McGee to Denver. This is one that is potentially something. So the Cavaliers got Isaiah Hartenstein, a 2023 second-round pick, and a 2027 second-round pick. And the Nuggets just get JaVale. I mean, JaVale has given championship teams some functional minutes. I don't think he's going to play big minutes for them, but some spot minutes off the bench to give a little bit of rim protection when Jokic needs a rest, I think that's fine. They only gave up Hardenstein and a couple second rounders, one of which is protected 31 through 46. So I think that's pretty good for both sides. Oh, DeLon right to Sacramento for Corey Joseph and a 2021 second round pick. I was a little bit confused by the Kings. Like, they're stocking up on guards because they got De'Aaron Fox, and then they also have Tyrese Halliburton, and then they also have Buddy Hield, and then they got DeLon and Terrence Davis at the deadline. I mean, I don't mind it for both sides. I don't think the Pistons were really gonna do anything with DeLon. Like, I don't think they really saw him as part of the future, and I think their path back to the playoffs is probably long enough that getting some second round picks out of the deal is a reasonable return. And then this one happened before the trade deadline. PJ Tucker to Milwaukee. This one I quite like. I know PJ Tucker has been bad this season. However, first I'll go through what the trade actually is. So the Rockets received DJ Augustine, DJ Wilson, the right to swap their 2021 second round pick for Milwaukee's 2021 first round pick. And they got Milwaukee's 2023 first round pick unprotected. That's a little bit. And the Bucks got Rodion Kurucs, PJ Tucker, a 2022 first round pick. They got their own back. That's funny. And $110,000 in cash. And the Suns got Torrey Craig. So the Suns did not give up a ton here, and they get Torrey Craig. That's nice for them. The Bucks get PJ Tucker, who I think is actually very important for them. One of the things that has concerned me about the Bucks in the first half of the season is how much they are relying on Bobby Portis as part of their rotation. I think Brook Lopez has fallen off a little bit in the last couple of years, and I think there's a non-trivial chance that he gets played off the floor in the playoffs at some point. Not necessarily every series, but I think there are going to be matchup issues potentially against the Nets where like his drop coverage that he essentially has to play. He's not good at switching at all. And especially if you're going to switch him out onto like James Harden, that is essentially why the Rockets put it the Jazz so often in the West. And it's basically going to be the same thing, except Lopez isn't even as mobile as Gobert. So that to me, the Bucks need an ability to go small. And if Bobby Portis was going to be the key to that, I was very nervous about it. And I think PJ Tucker, even if he doesn't give you a ton offensively, he can spot up in the corner, live there. Maybe teams will force him to shoot 10 threes a game, and he'll have to be willing to pull the trigger on those. But I think his physicality defensively, and his overall mobility, his switchability will be a key to them matching up with a team like the Nets. It'll be nice to be able to throw him at KD. So yeah, I think that was a quality move for them. And then in terms of what the Rockets got in return, DJ Augustine, I think that is kind of nothing. DJ Wilson, yeah, sure. Why not? Like the Rockets are sort of in major big time rebuilding mode. Might as well take a flyer on a guy who hasn't really worked out in Milwaukee, hasn't had a ton of opportunity, and see what you think of him in your system. And then some picks and stuff that seems reasonable for what they gave up. And then Ariza going to Miami for Myers Leonard, who has now been cut by OKC, and a 2027 second round pick. That's a no-brainer. Good move for the Heat. OKC probably wasn't going to do anything for Ariza and wasn't going to get much better than this. And this is a little bit to me like the Iguodala trade. He's not as good as Iguodala, but it's a little bit like that in terms of like, this is just a guy with good size at the wing who can just be a functional, smart player, make good decisions on the floor, and hit a three if you swing it to him at the end of the shot clock. So I think that was a pretty good move for both sides as well. And that is it. I'm going to go back through the comments, and then I'm probably going to wrap this up in a minute. Let's have a peek. Our biggest weakness is rebounding. I feel like we should get Drummond and just ask him to rebound. I think that's a good theory. I also I'm pretty sure I saw Drummond was shooting below 45% at the rim, which is like pretty insane for a big man. And he's not really a great rim protector either. I think he causes as many issues as he fixes for the Raptors. I think part of what has made the Raptors rebounding feel so bad lately is that they have been missing Iguodala, Anunoby, and Siakam, and for some of these games, and those guys are huge to what they do because of how small VanVleet and Lowry are. And hopefully getting a little bit more height in Gary Trent Jr. And frankly, a little bit more focus on boxing out. That's one of the things that has frustrated me with Norm in the past is he just loves to watch that ball come off the rim instead of hitting somebody's body. So hopefully Gary Trent Jr. will be a little bit more dedicated to boxing out and keeping guys off of weak side rebounds. Yeah, so, I mean, Drummond, I wouldn't turn down Drummond at this point on a minimum for the rest of the season, but I also wouldn't have been willing to give up anything to get him. Let's see what else we got. Are you excited to watch Gary Trent play tonight? I am really excited, and I'm probably going to do a breakdown in the next week of his first game or two, just like a film study type of thing. Trevor Ariza to Miami. I did bring that one up. I expected Casey to secure DeLon. Yeah, I think the Pistons are just so far from really doing anything that whatever future assets you can get in terms of draft capital is probably worth it, and just bottom out this season and see how good of a pick you can get. Bobby Portis has been really good this season. I do agree. I just wonder. I wonder how much of that will convert against the very best teams in a playoff series. Like if you have time to strategize and come up with a system to attack him defensively, I think he is like the most exploitable piece on the Bucks, and I think that probably was going to be a problem against really elite teams. Is Myers Leonard career over? Hopefully. Drummond is a scoring liability. He could protect the rim okay, but I don't think he brings a ton. Norman Dunks are in Raptors Hall of Fame, 100% sure. And should Gary Trent start for us? I think Norm was kind of a no-brainer. I would say Gary Trent, I probably would start him just because that's probably going to be your best 5 players is him with OG Siakam, Fred, and Lowry. If you want a little bit more size, you could go with Boucher. I know Nurse likes to bring Boucher off the bench. Yeah, I would say it's a little bit matchup dependent. Like it's hard to make your starting 5 be OG Siakam, Trent, Lowry, VanVleet against like the Sixers because OG matching up against Embiid, and then Simmons still has great size too. So matchups like that are tough, and you probably need to bring in one of Baines or Boucher anyways. At least Boucher has the length there. But I would be fine with Trent starting. I also think if Nurse wants to bring him off the bench, I don't really think that's a big issue either. And in terms of Bembry, I think I'm not 100% sold on Bembry. I think he gives us some good things, but I also think like he feels like a relief sometimes because the other options are so bad. Bembry's lack of shooting in particular, I think, hurts. He just gives teams, especially really good defensive teams, an option to like sag off of him and start to bother Siakam a little bit more. And one of the things I'm looking for as the Raptors go down the back part of this season is for Siakam to pick up his aggression a little bit. And I don't even mean in terms of attacking the rim. I know like when Leo Rautins is on the broadcast, he loves to talk about how Siakam needs to attack the rim. He needs to attack the rim. That's good. But also like Siakam can't just attack the rim. That's not the sort of player that he needs to be, because that's what he tried to do against the Celtics last year, and they just packed the paint and the Raptors were screwed. Like he needs that 3-point shooting and volume 3-point shooting as a counter to really packing the paint. So I would not, I would like to see him keep his aggression up and keep like, and I'm also talking like post touches, force like attack and let the double team come and then kick it out to OG for a 3 or whatever, like that kind of aggression too, not just putting shots up, but also like force the defense to react and pass out of the double teams. And that's something that I encourage everybody to watch moving forward. I think Siakam has made really big strides in his ability to play make, and that's something that's definitely worth keeping an eye on as they move forward. Will the Raptors make the playoffs? The Raptors will make the play-in games, at least, I believe, and I think they probably will win it. I do expect them to play a playoff series, and depending who it's against, I can also see them winning that playoff series as well. And maybe in a future video, I will discuss potential matchups and who I think they would fare best against. Anyways, that's going to do it for this stream. Thank you for watching. This was my first one, so hopefully I can just keep getting better over time. Thanks for tuning in, and check out the next one. And stay tuned for that Fred VanVleet steals video, which will be dropping hopefully today. If not, it'll go up tomorrow. Thanks again. Bye.